Let's now welcome our next guest speaker, Raman. Chris, are you there?
I think I'm there.
Okay, great. Welcome, Chris. Chris, I will briefly introduce you. So we're moving on to a more technical topic, but still really interesting. You are the founder and managing partner of Ventures for Growth, a boutique M&A advisory focused on mid-market SMEs across the Benelux and Northern France. Ventures for Growth is a long-time and trusted member of Transio, so thank you so much for your trust. It's always a pleasure to work with you. You advise family businesses and private equity-backed platforms on succession, cross-border acquisitions, and post-deal value creation. And today you're going to explain valuing SMEs, science, experience, and perception. So it's really interesting presentation where you combine theory and also perceptions based on your experience as an M&A advisor. So thank you so much, Chris, and the floor is yours.
Yes. Good morning, I would say. I hope this is working more or less fine.
Yeah, we can see your slides.
Just a second that I just put everything correctly. You still see the slides?
Yeah.
And now I think the laser pointer, I'm up and running. So thanks.
Thanks.
Just move a little bit down here. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So also on my behalf, it's always a pleasure to be in, I would say, in the Transio family. I had the chance to work with Edwin and with others of you before, so that's always, I would say, very, very nice. So on my part also, morning, and thank to Transio and Wallonie Entreprendre en fait, for having us. I think what brings us together is really not my 15 years of experience, because I'm still new in this business, but I think really your thousands. I see there's a lot of attendance for everywhere, I would nearly say. So that's why I decided to start with a bold number, and I think the bold number is, I hope you see it. Okay, it's 3 trillion. And I love the number. I asked it around and I asked, yes, in the next decade, what's going to happen in Europe? And many of us that I contacted, they said, well, it will be maybe 6-8 trillion of business that's going to change hands. But I love to keep it with the 3 trillion. Certainly, I would say, it's a kind of an order of magnitude, but it also gives us a feel of the importance. And I'm not talking about the mega deals here. I'm really talking about the quiet deals, the complex deals, the human small, medium enterprise deals, the ones I would say you and I work on every day. I think what's important here is that, in fact, our business, we are more in the kind of success rate business. So if we only count 3 to 4%, it's a huge amount of business that is moving around in Europe. And I think what is important to us is that we can at least bring value to our clients, and I would say prove that the 3 or 4% means at least more than 20% to them. And that's why Mary asked me to to tell something more about how I would say. And let's move then to the next slide. That in fact there are 3 things into my belief. I mean, it's not only 3. There is a lot more, but 3 things that decide in fact the value and the price acceptance. So the first thing is, and in fact, the real question, in fact, in most of our mandates is, what's a fair price? And that's not really correct in the sense that a fair price is, or the correct price, it's more a price that will be accepted by both sellers and buyers, and also by their advisors. So science helps us there, and it gives us defensible valuable rates. Experience, I think that's what counts, and gives us the chance to put this in the structure. And then perception, yeah, most of the things I I think, and in my perspective, that's really the most important thing, because perception is the story that as well the buyer as the seller is going to tell home. And and we saw it also already in the session that both brought us. I mean, it's not only AI or the Excel exercise that will help us, I would say, with the value, because otherwise none of us would be necessary. So there is a lot more that will be needed. And maybe let me start before going into the science part to really what we all, I would say, feel into the real world. The most important thing is, in fact, the psychological barriers to the price acceptance. So before we touch formulas, I think we need to acknowledge the psychology. And I think the first thing is always the important thing. I made a picture of myself here, and the first move I've learned in my experience is a very important one, and let's say, in fact, the first serious number anyone will hear in our dealings that will shape everything else that follows. And so it's important that we remember that even an unsolicited deal for someone in, let's say, 2019, that's a number that anyone heard. And the problem is that once someone heard a number, that's kind of a magic one that will keep for the whole process. So what brings me also to the idea that it's important to wait and to see who is going to bring the first number to the table. In each case, it's always the same thing. I would say, so I call this the anchoring effect. So the first number that someone mentions, of course, you have the other side of the spectrum, which is more the endowment effect. In fact, founders, they systematically overvalue their own company. And then the whole loss aversion plays also. So they overvalue because it was their thing. So and their company, it's always their life work. So it's always an incredible value. Okay. Maybe a line that I often use is with founders. I think there is an EBITDA of, I would say, the company, but there is also an EBITDA of your heart. So what you feel, it's also important, and both are rarely the same. But let's move a little bit to the evidence baseline. When Mary asked me to bring this topic to the table, what I did is a little bit of research, and what we learn, in fact, in our market is within the last 5 or 6 years, the multiples which we are seeing, they are in fact very, very stable. So over the 5-6 years, the multiples only changed. I would say if you see the average is about 5.1 to 5.3. In software, they're always been higher, and in retail hospitality, they've always been lower. But in fact, so if we park the psychology part and we look to the numbers, then they are stable. But in fact, the real volatility in our deals is rates, risk premium, leverage tolerance, margin quality. So valuation, I would say, is sits more in what we would call assumptions and inputs, of course. And so what the numbers, in fact, really say here is, I think sometimes we hear that people are telling us, multiples have collapsed. I think this is often a shorthand for explaining that discount rates and risk premium, they have moved. And that banks, and that's the more important thing, they have tightened the ceiling. So, and in fact, so I put a little bit, I would say, the percentage moves that we see up to those known multiples, how they move with I would say all those kind of input. And what we did in our company, and it's not a promotion for the things we did, it's just to explain you that, in fact, we built since, I would say, the beginning of our existence, a kind of automated valuation engine to make sure that we have always the numbers ready. So what we do is we take, in fact, the NBB, so the national bank filings, even if it was at the time, I would say, PDFs, we kind of process them. We put all the numbers in our own engines. We are making them, I would say, nice, and then we are, of course, applying all the normalizations with the customers. Then what we also keep in I would say, in our databases is the whole industry benchmark valuations coming from Vlerik School, of coming from, I would say, everything that is present. We put that in Excel macros, and in fact, then we come back out of that with a kind of, I would say, valuation sensitivity analysis, and also a nice report which you can then use in discussions with our client. In fact, the fact we do that helps us, but I think the most important thing, and I believe that's for everyone in the room, is it's only a starting point. This helps us, in fact, to start with evidence and then debate the meaning. Yeah? There's I think it's and this one, it's maybe more important. It's not the figures that will decide who wins. I mean, in SME transfer, it's the one that in fact that will master, not only because we're also integrating artificial intelligence in this kind of tools we develop, but artificial intelligence, what Wout presented earlier on, this is never going to do what we have to do, meaning the reader, in fact, or read the founder psychology, managing family politics, building coalitions, getting the people emotionally ready for the transaction. So there's a whole lot more to be done around that. This brings me also to I would say, and I mentioned it earlier on, and certainly in the announcement of the presentation, and I'm unsure if everyone knows about it. I imagine that some more of you are even member of those committees, but in fact you have pretty interesting paperwork. If some of you don't have that, we can provide those because they are publicly available, in fact. But so you have the International Valuation Standard Council, and you have the European Group of Valuers Association. Both of them have, in the beginning of the year, produced again very detailed papers on how we should, I would say, bring our valuation to the table. A couple of remarks I have there, of course, is that depending on how big your company is, you don't need to do all of this. And we typically work, let's say, between 2.5 and 5 million, and between 5 and 25, and then from 25 up. And if you don't like, I would say, to read and to implement all those papers, the good news is that for all of this work, there are quite some tools available on the marketplace, and I listed them just to make sure that if you want to use those tools, the tools are each of them a member of one of those committees. So they participate, they implement this. So that's very easy, I would say, to help you with the correct valuation approaches. But in summary, I would say IVS is more about a global discipline, and EVS is more about, I would say, governance. So IVS tells you how to value, and EVS tells you how to defend it. But in each case, it is implemented in the tools. For instance, for the bigger deals, we most of the time use Valutico. Valutico is a member, by the way, of those valuation groups, and So what I was just saying sounds complicated, but you have tools available to make your life easy. Okay. And we all, I'm unsure, but I mean, valuing companies typically, I think we have implemented in our own methods about 13 different valuation methods. But the more classical ones, I mean, discounted cash flow, market comparables, and certainly debt capacity. I think all three are correct, of course, but the more important thing is perception and experience. It's not only science. And before I will go in a classical example, I think another thing that I've seen in just preparing for this session is if you see the last 4 or 5 years and you see Wallonia, in fact, versus Benelux, well, evidence shows us there is quite some difference. So if you see, and I researched this in the KPMG, in the Orbis, Valutico, PitchBook. So we looked to all those numbers just to make sure that we are not seeing something here which we didn't expect. But in fact, Wallonia looks small on the map, but valuation varies, I would say, like a continent, because the same deal, if you're talking about a deal that, let's say, like 7 or 10 million, you will quickly have a difference about 1 to 3 million. So I think dealing with cross-border deals makes it, therefore, even more difficult. So that's science, okay? Where the model meets the market is, in fact, and simply summarized, there is a delta between the reported and the normalized earnings. There is a delta between the theoretical average and what the credit committee at the bank will tell you. There's a delta between the buyer's synergy story and what they are prepared to prepay for it. And finally, I would say the perception delta, trust, speed, and deal fatigue are always in our back for every deal in the market. And then maybe just to summarize, the whole story here is the street reality. That's what the ranges tell us. And I always, what I would suggest is always keeping in mind that even the ranges, I think you need to have a bit of a house curve behind you, because the beautiful stories that you got 10 times, and when you learn then that the bank is only comfortable in nowadays for only 3.5 times, and working capital is volatile, you will quickly see how the deal will be moving. The other part of the story is, of course, if you look to what the buyer really is looking at, it's not the nice story what the seller is telling. It's more, and he will always express this in a certain way. The buyer will say, I'm very uncomfortable with the risk, because buyers only look into risks. And what are the risks they are facing is, of course, the financial risk, the vendor dependencies, is there, how will the the year end look? What about seasonality? And then buyers are also super afraid about what will change in the DNA of the company. Will when the parking lot of the founder is empty, will it still be the same company, or will everyone act differently? So what I try to bring here is, if you in the talkings try to find out what the buyers fear most in the beginning, I think that this will really help you during the whole process. And of course, maybe your entrepreneur, your seller, will maybe lose a little bit of his ego, but I think you will really, I would say, gain a lot at the end of the process. So think early on. All right. I think this is a very important one, because what I've learned is that buyers will forgive lower starting points. if they trust the numbers, and they will be willing to move that first mentioned number upwards if there is not a lot of creative accounting. And maybe my personal definition of creative accounting, if you need 45 minutes to explain to a junior analyst on the buyer side what needs to be changed in the corrected EBITDA, I'm not sure if this is going to pass well on the buyer side. Given this in perspective is also, I think, the best you can really learn and explain and help the seller with is just tell him 6 months upfront, try to implement at least a disciplined management reporting, that we are confident with the numbers. And I remember also most people, in fact, are asking, what multiple did you get? I think the answer today is more that's a wrong question. Multiples are, in fact, like we have seen, really, really stable. The real issue is, in fact, what are we multiplying? To give concrete example, if you are multiplying, I would say, if there is a problem with your quality of earnings of 250K times 7, that's 1,750,000. And that's a more arguing than a 6.5 or a 7 times valuation issue. Very shortly, certainly because we are here talking about Europe, what I've learned also is that it's better to deal with Germany than with Poland because, yeah, the WACC is not portable across borders. That's anything. If we have covered, in fact, indeed, the science to practice, then in real life, I try to summarize a little bit what is really most important here. It's, in fact, the deals and the pricing. The most important thing behind is, of course, the leverage. So what is historically, this was way higher. Today, banks tend to do a lot less. So it means that prices come down, or you need to invent it through the structure with earnouts or other kinds of solutions. In 60% of the deals, we see that working capital will certainly bring swings from 10 to 15%. And what we have learned, certainly in cross-border, one of the last deals we did in Wallonia was in fact with a Swiss company. You had to request for Loterie Belge de la Concurrence approval. So this can sometimes, I would say, swing a deal from a couple of weeks to, in one of the cases we did also in Wallonia, was 18 months before we got approval. So not so easy. All right. Why fair isn't always accepted? I think I mentioned it a little bit. The first that gives a number, the buyer that always want I would say, a fantasy price, and then in auction, the one that wins always pays too much. And what we've learned is that, in fact, if you're working and dealing with family enterprises, the layer where we put the most of our time in is the unseen part. So the visible part, the EBITDA, the growth, that's an easy one. But less visible, working capital discipline, customers are how is the distribution, how is the supplier dependency, what's the revenue quality, and then the whole, I would say, invisible thing, trust, leadership, continuity, culture, decision quality. There is where the most value is created or destroyed. So I think we spend in family business most of the time there, absolutely. And then fairness is architecture, not arithmetic. You see it, in fact. When the founder talks about respect and the buyer talks about discipline and risk, in fact, they are already secretly talking about architecture. And maybe one case study that will help, it's an imaginary case, the Maison Delvaux out of Namur. In fact, this is the case of an entrepreneur which 7 years ago he died. He had 3 children. Mark was working in the company as CFO, but he didn't like the way his father was working at that moment, so he went to Brussels to become a CFO there. Claire had to take over the company. She was running it, and then they had an artist, Sophie, living in Lyon. And then 4 or 5 years later, of course, then we have to come in, and they want to bring in the numbers, like we say, and then you see if you do an equal distribution of the value, you come to 8 million too, and then if you would need to equally split it, you would come to 2,000,007. But there comes in the thinking that we all need to do is, in fact, how are you going to solution this 8 million conflict? And in fact, what we need to do there is in fact taking a step back, discuss with the family on and on and on, and in fact, what we often bring a solution in there, if it is a family situation, and certainly if Claire has worked, I would say, for and been underpaid for the last 7 years, what we mostly do in those I would say, shareholder situation, where they have been working as a family together, most of the time you need to present them with, I would say, a 20 or a 25% discount. So finally, we made a solution there where in the 2 million was brought down to, I would say, 6 million, meaning they always want a nice round figure, 2 million each, and then 150K for all the costs involved. And the other part is, of course, the financeability. So for this family, in fact, the fact that they could structure the payment over 7 years made it a lot easier for Sophie to pay back, in fact, the family. And then the nice thing also is really in talking with those families is find out, I would say, how we are going to handle the legacy. So in that case, there was a kind of a fund for local craftsmen. And one of the siblings, I made also, I think became, I would say, a board member, an advisory board member in the company. So it is not always, I would say, straightforward with the figures that you're going to make the solution. So the founder's dilemma, I think many of you know, of course, this scenery. Yeah? The founder, is he going to choose for the highest bidder, or is he going to take the right bidder? And so we had a situation, in fact, where at a certain moment we had a very nice offer on the table for a Chinese industrial partner, and from an offer on the table from really a neighbor, there was like 2 million of difference. And on the Sunday evening, of course, the founder wanted to see us, and he said, I would like to continue to come in here, the 100 people, which I each know individually. I want to look them in the eyes, see them back often. So what I'm really asking is, I'm not going to take the best offer on the table. And finally, he proposed to us, which is pretty exceptional. He said, I know you're success-based driven, but I'm going to propose that you take your fee on the best offer, and but we are going to not to take, in fact, the highest offer, but we are going to take with one I feel comfortable with. So and that's that's a dilemma which we need to solve every day. Um,
Sorry, Chris, you have like 1 or 2 minutes.
okay,
then thank you.
Then the good news is those things are in the slides, and then I think yeah, I think this is more like summary from price to acceptance. It's a kind of a checklist. I think for me, the most important thing is not only the checklist and all the things we have to execute there, but it's the 3 to 7 psychological adjustment. And so identity, legacy, fairness, expectation reset, because what he told in the beginning, loss of control, family alignment, and finally letting go. I think that's the real journey. And then what I maybe voila, it's perfect timing. So what I would have loved to do also is I think with all the experiences on the table, I think it's a very good idea that each of us maybe pick 1 or 2 or 3 of those, and why not putting them together and sharing them together with Transeo, and maybe we can kind of put together a small experience book on that. So that's a little bit what I was
Thank you so much. And I think organizing a Transeo Academy, it's a specific activity for Transeo members. Next year, why not? If those doing valuation are interested, it would be great. Thank you for your proposal. So would you want that word, or can we have maybe time for 1 question or 2? It's a technical, but I think it was really interesting.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to just add is what I did is based on, I would say, public available information. I put a couple of I would say case studies together, like 7 of them, which I can share, and which each time stressed on what is really science, experience, perception here. So like we said, Marie, I will add this to the set with the PowerPoint, so no problem.
Sure. Thank you so much, Chris. That's really interesting. Are there comments or questions for Chris? Okay, we're going to continue then. Thank you so much.